Welcome
to
the
European
Institute for
Asian Studies.
We have three speakers this afternoon who are going to talk to you for about 15-20 minutes each, and then we'll have an opportunity over a period of about 45 minutes for questions and comments from the audience, and I intend to try and finish this fairly sharply at 4 o'clock. I'm Glyn Ford. I was a member of the European Parliament for quite a long time, and was particularly interested in Northeast Asia. One of the areas I focused on was Japan, so I realized how appropriate this event is. It's always seemed to me strange that the European Union, which is the world's biggest aid donor, and Japan, which was the world's number 2 aid donor, actually were not cooperating together closely, both in terms of at least letting each other know what they're doing, and secondly, maybe on some occasions, actually doing things together. But I won't keep you any longer. All of your speakers know far more than I do about the subject. And the first speaker we have is Patrick Simonnet, who's Deputy Head of Unit on International Development Dialogue in DEVCO.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation this afternoon. I don't know if I'm more knowledgeable than you on Japan, but I think it's anyway. Despite anything, I think it's a very good opportunity for us to have a dialogue. So I'm not sure I will last as long as 20 minutes, but I will give you, I hope, a short brief on where we stand in terms of EU-Japan relations on the development issues. So as you mentioned, my name is Patrick Simonnet. I'm the Deputy Head of Unit of the unit in DG DEVCO. I don't know if you're familiar with DG DEVCO. That's the Directorate General of the European Commission dealing with development and cooperation, and we have a unit which is dealing basically with the relations with our main bilateral and multilateral partners, so dealing with the UN, the OECD, G8, G20, and so including bilateral donors, meaning traditional donors and also emerging donors. So that's a pleasure for me to come and to discuss with you on Japan. If you allow me, I will try to make it quite simple and to talk about three things, or let's say 2.5 things. First, how do we engage with like-minded partners? And that means actually how do we engage in a multilateral context and in a bilateral context. I will then try to tell you why we consider that it's important for us now to engage with Japan on development issues. And I will leave it there, but I'm sure you will come back with further questions. So first, actually, indeed, we engage with. So what do we call? Like-minded partners. We call partners like-minded partners which are strategic partners and which share largely our fundamental values, the values of the Treaty of Lisbon. And we engage particularly with those partners in the multilateral fora. I mean, we engage with everybody actually in the multilateral fora, namely the UN, OECD, again, G8, G20. We engage with everybody, but it's true that we coordinate also very closely with those like-minded partners, and that's basically US, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, Switzerland, Norway, all those partners which we feel we can coordinate, particularly in this context. With Japan, I think it's fair to say that we most of the time on development issues found ourselves that we were on very converging lines, and that we have a large degree of convergence on our positions. why? It's probably because we both very much believe that development cooperation must be based on governance, inclusive growth, sustainable management of natural resources, peace and security, all those issues. And I would maybe say that even if we sometimes use different concepts, and some of you are familiar with the concepts, for example, which is put very much forward and for good reasons by Japan on human security, even if we don't necessarily use the same kind of concepts, I think very much the values which are and the ideas and the, let's say, when you unpack the concept, I think we largely agree with those different notions. So again, we sometimes speak a different language on development issues, but we very much align on the values themselves. A good example, I think, is TICAD. Actually, for those of you that don't know yet, I mean, how is it possible to ignore that there's going to be a Ticket 5 meeting in Yokohama in a few days? That's one of the biggest Africa development forum, which has been launched 20 years ago, I think, by Japan. And when you look at the subject, which are very much, and I think it's very much public domain, and so you can check that. The subject which are going to be promoted and discussed in this Japan Africa conference are very much the same topics or values or principles that we put forward ourselves, for example, in our EU-Africa strategic partnership, and which we very much, let's say, align with in terms of our relationship with Africa. So in this context, I think we can fairly say that we often speak the very same language. Then we engage with Japan very much also at bilateral level. Why do we do so? Because we do it with all our partners. So we have usually a dedicated development dialogue with our partner, which is very much complementary to what I was talking about in the let's say multilateral context. We cooperate in the multilateral context, but we also cooperate directly through bilateral dialogue, because that's again complementary, but that's also very much necessary, considering that we have with all those partners a wide-ranging type of bilateral relationship. We have a political relationship, commercial relationship, economic cooperation. So it's important also to cover development in this context, and to be sure that it fits well in the overall setup of our relationship. So and as you know, Japan is a strategic partner. We have annual summits. We have a wide-ranging type of relationship. We are negotiating right now a framework agreement, a free trade agreement. So all that is known, and so it's normal that we have also a strong relationship on development cooperation. More precisely, just to give you a bit of information on that, I mean, the development dialogue dates back to 2009. In 2009, I think that was you can find that again very easily in the sorry, I take my notes for that. In the statement of the 2009 summit, EU-Japan summit. So it was formalized in the summit statement of May 2009, and the first development dialogue took place actually in April 2010 in Tokyo. And at that time, both sides agreed to work together in view of the 2010 plenary meeting on MDGs, to give you an idea of the kind of subjects, as well as in view of the Busan conference, as well as on fragile states, climate funding for developing countries, and decided to continue dialogue on issues of mutual interest, including food security, Afghanistan and Africa. So that was the let's say the discussion in 2010. So what what really is what is the outcome of all that? From our perspective, we consider that we have delivered quite well against this background, and our cooperation has substantially increased since that time. We have indeed cooperated very much in the context of the Busan conference. We have cooperated very much in the context of Afghanistan. Our commissioner was last year in Tokyo at the Afghanistan Tokyo conference. But also what is very interesting, and also I think I'm sure Aiichiro will and Yamamoto will tell us more about that. I mean, our cooperation in the field has very much picked up, and we have a very wide-ranging type of operational coordination in the field. Just two examples that came to my mind when preparing a bit this discussion. For example, we, as you know, we have a mechanism in the Palestinian Authority, Palestinian territories, sorry, which is called PEGAS, which is a financial mechanism to provide direct financial assistance to the Palestinian authorities. And it happened that the JICA used this mechanism to transfer funds directly also through our mechanism to the Palestinian authorities. Another example, and it's frankly one among several, is the cooperation that we have on and even the co-financing that exists when coming to loan making. So as you know, JICA is a loan provider, especially after the integration of GBIC, and we have been cooperating very much, co-financing very much with GBIC. There's one, to give you an example, one co-financing which is just happening now in Nepal, which is called the Nepal Tanahun hydropower project. Sorry for the pronunciation, which is a co-financing between the EIB, JICA, and I think the Qatari. There's also the Qatari and other partners. But definitely that's one of the forms of cooperation that is working very well. So that's at operational level. At operational level, at policy level, we have met several times since 2010. We met very soon, very recently. Sorry, in May, beginning of May, and our commissioner is going as well to Tokyo at the end of this week. For to participate and to attend the Ticket 5 conference, and we'll have also some further discussion with the Japanese authorities. So overall, this bilateral relationship is working well, and we're very much at the EU level confident that it will develop further. Maybe to finish, why Japan is an important partner for us in this context. First, maybe three remarks there. First, Japan is, I mean, you know it as I do. I mean, is a very important, and you mentioned it, I think, a big donor, and we consider, and it's a global donor, so with a regional influence which goes beyond Asia to Africa to Latin America. I'm sure Aiichiro will tell you about this nice project of salmon farming in Chile, for example, which is one of the good examples, I think, which really speaks well about the global reach of JICA's cooperation. So with this partner, it's obvious that if we work together, we have a chance to be more effective, more efficient in our support to our partner countries. So that's very much what we want to do, and if I may on that, I think we have a particular chance to to increase our let's say efficiency in the field because of the new let's say EU policy, development policies that we are putting in place. As you probably know, we're giving much more importance in the future to sustainable agriculture and sustainable energy, and those are two sectors where Japan has good experience, so can make it interesting to look for synergies. We're going to, and that's coming from out of the Agenda for Change, which is this new piece of development policy. Thanks, Aiichiro. And there will be much more emphasis in our future development policy on private sector, on blending as well, so blending loans with grants. And Japan is very much a champion for us on those issues. So we feel again, due to this experience, we can really look for synergies. Japan is also very much JICA is very much increasing its interventions in Africa, and we feel with the relationship we have also with Africa, the experience, we can also probably exchange our experience with JICA on that. So first, Japan is such a big donor with us that it makes sense to work together in the field. Second, you probably know that the what we call the global development agenda is very much piling up those days. We talk about the post 2015 new development framework. We talk about the global partnership, Busan Global Partnership. We're talking about new forms of financing for development. So there's many issues on the table, and we feel that with a partner like Japan, we can definitely make a more coherent contributions to this agenda if again we discuss and talk together as like-minded. So that's second, and finally, and I think that was mentioned in your invitation, that we have a big challenge in common, we feel, which is to bring the emerging donors on board. So the emerging economies, they have an important, I think everyone agree on that, experience of poverty reduction at home. They have their own experience of that, very compelling, and they play an increasing role in the developing world. And so we, for that, and we need to bring them to the table, to the discussion table. And again, we feel we can cooperate with Japan on that, and with others as well. Build, let's say, build coalitions and bring those new actors in the discussion. Ourselves, we are very much looking, let's say, reflecting on those emerging economies. We have decided to reduce globally our, let's say, to put it like that, to focus our assistance in the future on countries most in need. That's what we call the differentiation principle. The effect of which will be to reduce our bilateral cooperation with upper middle income countries, and countries representing more than 1% of the global GDP, which means that we are going definitely from 2014 onwards, we are going to scale down drastically cooperation in countries like China, India, and all those countries. So we are going to have to move to a different type of relationship with those countries, and we feel this new type of relationship is definitely to engage dialogue, to exchange on the wider development agenda. And again, this is something we need to be several to do, and we can do usefully with a partner like Japan. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you everyone for this great opportunity. It's a pleasure indeed to talk about particular subject on Japan-EU collaboration in development cooperation, which is exactly about my job here in Brussels. What I'm talking about in the next 10 minutes or so, using 4 slides, is all about the development cooperation aspect of Japan-EU relationship. There are so many fronts in Japan-EU relationship, such as investment, trade, investment, business, energy, but I really focus today on the development cooperation aspect, which Patrick and I have been working so hard in the past year. Okay, let me start with this slide. You look at the Japanese flag and the European Union flag, and I've got Irish flag in honor of the Irish presidency. Is there any Irish here? Okay, no. I think, by the way, the rotating presidency is one of the great mechanism of European Union, because there's no such thing in the World Bank and United Nations. So each member has an equal opportunity to run this huge vehicle every 6 months. I think this is a great mechanism which Europeans should be proud of. There's nothing else in the other international organization. Okay, let me start with my favorite starter. Whenever I talk about European Union, I start with this phrase. Here, I have a booklet about your guide to the Lisbon Treaty, which is available in any info point, in European info point in Brussels. This nice book starts with this paragraph. I will read for you. After decades of war that cost millions of lives, the foundation of the European Union marked the beginning of a new era where European countries solve their problems not by talking, not by fighting. By talking, not by fighting. This is easier said than done. If you look at the world, there's millions of people still fighting violently in this world. So this, I think, is a founding spirit of European Union, which should be shared by the people, by all the countries and all the people in the world. So this is my very favorite starter to talk about European Union. Okay, the next point. Let me start with very basic questions. Why should Japan work together with the European Union in development cooperation? I raised 3 points. Because the European Union is collectively the largest ODA provider. The collectively is important. Currently, the total official flow from the developed country to the developing countries is about 14 billion US dollars. Out of this, if you combine all the member state, European EU member state aid with the aid from the Commission, like the DG DEVCO or DG ECHO, each will constitute more than 55% of the global aid flow already. America accounts for 20%, Japan 10%. So there's a very reason why Japan should work with European Union. If we work with European Union collectively, we will be accountable for about more than 70 or 80% of the global aid flow. Statistically speaking, this is very important, but provided that European Union speak in one voice, in more cohesive way. If European Union is fragmented in giving aid, then nobody will listen to European Union. But this is the point number 1. The second answer could be because the EU is pursuing a comprehensive approach in security, development, and democratic governance, 3D, what they call 3D, which is important. As I will mention later, the current development challenge is so complex and difficult that no single donor can cope with it effectively on their own, because it is a complex issue of not only on development, but also with security, terrorism, and all other complex issues. So the approach that's currently taken by the European Union under the comprehensive approach is very, very useful for Japan and attractive for Japan to work together with European Union. This is number 2. The third reason, because the European Union may offer Japan ample opportunities to strengthen its foreign policy impact. I'm not a diplomat, so I'm not 100% sure about this, but perhaps Kaori from the Japanese mission will pick up this point later. So for the answer 1 and 2, I'm completely convinced. And for the 3, perhaps there will be some discussion for the foreign policy point of view. So these are the answers. So let me go to the next trip. Yep. This way. 4, 3, 2. Oh, I got 2 already. Okay, let me repeat the state of play. As Patrick mentioned, there are so many things happened between EU and Japan in the area of development cooperation in the past 5 years. I would highlight 3 things just briefly. The one was mentioned already by Patrick. There was a memorandum of understanding was signed between JICA and EuropeAid in 2009, which is still relevant. It was all about focusing collaboration in Africa on infrastructure, power, and agriculture. And since then, there has been continuing dialogue on the policy level, as Patrick mentioned, between the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, JICA, and EU institutions on development. For example, there was a high-level policy dialogue between JICA President Tanaka and Commissioner Peebles 2 times last year. And then they're going to meet again next week during the sideline of the TCAT 5 in Yokohama. So there's been very constant dialogue on the top level, high-level policy level dialogue. And the third one, and Japan-JICA EU development policy dialogue took place just recently, last May, with the EU Center delegation headed by Gustav Martin Prada, Director for Policy for DG DEVCO, and Patrick also the member, and then also EU delegation is in Tokyo, was a member of the EU mission, and I was also in the dialogue. So during this dialogue, we talk about a wide range of issues where Japan and EU work together, for example, in the post-MDG framework, global partnership, and Africa, so on. And the third point, which is very likely to happen, is there's an ongoing negotiation regarding the EPA, Europe Economic Partnership Agreement. In parallel with that agreement, negotiations of EPA, there's an ongoing negotiation on legally binding political agreement between Japan and EU. And I heard that the development is likely to be the part of the agreement between Japan and EU. If this will happen, perhaps in the next 2 or 3 years, hopefully, the Japan-EU collaboration on development will be upgraded more powerfully as the Japan-EU as part of the Japan-EU political agreement. So these are the highlights that I should mention at this time. Okay, let me take a little a step aside from the subject. As everybody knows, the concept of development in the 21st century has dramatically changed from that in 20th century, particularly during the Cold War. As everybody knows, during the Cold War period, the Western donors, including Japan, focused their aid to bolster the regimes of the West Bloc countries. So during that time, no governance or security issue was mentioned. I remember when I joined JICA in late 1970s, all we needed to do is give more aid to friendly countries. That was the pressure. So we didn't talk about, there was no such word as governance or security at that time. Yes, all there existed was the Cold War, how to avoid Cold War. So everybody was focusing on aid to support the regimes. And Soviet Union, by the way, had helped the Eastern Bloc countries in order to put them together into the Soviet bloc. So there was a very clear, paradigm of aid during the Cold War. But what happened after the Cold War? There emerged so many difficult, complex issues, such as national, ethnic, religious conflict emerged. Development must be linked to security, peace, and state building. This is the change. So currently, development workers should have dual challenge. One is economic development, the other is security. we have to be both responsible for development and state building and security. So you know that our challenges have become so complex and so difficult. This is the situation where we are placed in the current world. So, but I think after the Lisbon Treaty, which took into effect in 2009, I think the EU institution, European Union institution for external action, has very well created and organized to respond to such complex needs of the global community, much better than bilateral or multilateral institutions, in my view. Because, I'm sorry, Patrick, I'm not saying EES in the universe, center of the universe, but I'm saying EES is very well located to coordinate all development, humanitarian assistance, and security and political affairs. DEVCO is a specialist organization in development cooperation. They have huge experience over 30, 40 years, and they're operating in more than 100 countries in the world. And ECHO has a specialist in providing humanitarian assistance and civil protection. And ES is looking at the security and political affairs of all the countries as part of their external action. So if EU has implement more cohesive and combined external action by looking at all these issues, development, humanitarian assistance, security, political affairs, I think European Union has more stronger impact on its global affairs. So this is the point that I'm so envious about European Union of having such a wonderful, a mechanism. But it is a mechanism. You have to utilize it more effectively than it is now. Okay. Let me say a few more things about this. What's happening currently is the DEVCO is a specialized development, and ECHO is specialized in humanitarian emergency assistance. What is being discussed now is how to link development emergency assistance under what is called LED, linking emergency and development. This, I think, is a huge challenge, not only on EU, but also the global community. When you talk about resilience, disaster management, food security, and terrorism, insecurity, all these things must be tackled not only by emergency humanitarian intervention, but also with long-term development, reconstruction, and state building. This is one thing. And also, we need to look at the linkage, nexus between development and security. So all said, I really expect the European Union have stronger capability of responding all these complex issues by combining all the existing institutions, combining the forces of existing institutions such as DG, DEVCO, ECHO, and EES. Okay. So lastly, Japan as a partner for more global Europe. I'll talk a little bit about the future aspect of how Japan and possibly with the new Asian donors who are present here, will work together for more global Europe. In the phase of EU development cooperation, as Patrick mentioned, the Agenda for Change, which was adopted last year by the Council of European Commission, 2009 to 2011, this small booklet tells all about the change for the better, change for the better in terms of EU development cooperation. First of all, it stresses the importance of coordination and cohesion of EU member states in terms of giving more impact on development. This is very much in line with the Paris Declaration process of the OECD DAC since 2004. And one big thrust of this Agenda for Change is EU joint programming of aid. Just for your knowledge, It's currently a European Union produces this kind of country strategy paper for most of the aid partners, the development partners in the world. This is a book about Zambia, and they formulate this strategy paper for each country they are working with. This paper is composed of two parts. The first part is about the assessment of the country needs and country strategies. And the second part is indicative programs for all the EU development cooperation instrument. So what's happening now is this is simply for the EU paper. What's happening now under the joint programming is all the member states of the European Union plus Commission are joining forces to make one document, one EU document for each country. Currently, this private pilot project is going on in 6 countries, and hopefully they're going to expand it to the 40 countries in the next few years. So if EU joined up their programming to each partner countries, then I think EU have more impact on development on each country. Then this will create ample opportunity for Japan, not only for Japan and for other Asian donors to join up forces with EU. So this is an area where we can work together with EU. Currently in Rwanda and in Laos, Rwanda, and Malawi, we already started dialogue with EU delegation in the fields about joining up with this exercise. So JICA could be a partner who joined up with this exercise. This, I think, is a very, very good exercise, not only for European Union member states, but also to other donor communities in each country. So this is one thing. And lastly, I've already talked about the development security nexus for a more stable world and linking emergency with the development assistance. All these two issues is not European issue. It is really a global issue. It was tested in Iraq and Afghanistan 5 years ago. Now it is being tested in Mali and potentially in Syria. So in these countries, there are so many fragile states and post-conflict countries in the world. Globally, 1/4 of the global population still live in the fragile or post-conflict countries. So this indicates how important it is for us to work together in linking development security and linking emergency and development. So from this aspect, EU is the best partner, I think, for Japan and JICA to work together for the peace and stability and the development of the world. So thank you very much. This is my presentation.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you very much for inviting me here to this event. I should maybe clarify in the beginning a few things. First of all, after all these years in the development sector, in the aid sector, I'm getting a bit allergic to aid. So that's the reason why I dropped also the word aid in the title. Japan and the EU development aid partners has become development partners. So there's more than aid to promote development, as we all know. And I think that is an element that I would like to address as well. Secondly, I'm of course not at all an expert on Japan. I follow with my foundation, the European Center for Development Policy Management, the European Union very closely, and particularly EU-Africa relations. But of course I couldn't resist to accept the invitation, since it came from our very good friend Aiichiro, who is also here on the panel. And what I did yesterday evening was to try to put together a kind of comparative analysis based on some of the DAC peer reviews. This is about ECDPM. You can read all about it on websites and elsewhere, but we are a kind of an independent, non-partisan facilitator of dialogue between Europe and Africa. And of course, we also build alliances, as the European Commission also does, with the non-EU players in development, Japan, the BRICS, USA, South Korea, Switzerland, and others. So our role is to provide analysis, to make sure that there is effective dialogue, and we also do capacity building in Africa to make sure that the African institutions are strengthened in the partnership with the European Union. Now, the three parts that I would like to address: changing development context, a little bit of comparative analysis in a few areas, and I warn already, I'm going to be sometimes a bit too provocative, or maybe also a bit too general in some of the elements that I would highlight, but I understand that this is of course also part of this meeting, that we have some discussion, so allow me to try to be sometimes a bit provocative. And then at the end I will try to see where Japan and the EU can join forces. The changing development context, we are all familiar with this of course, particularly as Europeans: economic crisis, declining aid budgets, while there is much more need to tackle development and particularly all these global challenges, climate change and others. So there is a whole debate going on beyond ODA, beyond official development assistance, which stands at this moment for only about 7–8% of all financial flows to developing countries. So other issues related to South-South cooperation, remittances, domestic resource mobilization, taxation, capital flight in developing countries are becoming much more important than development aid if you want to promote development. We have new players, this has already been said, and very important, I would feel, development or the whole sector of aid is no longer a technical domain, which it used to be a bit in the past. We had all types of technical projects, we had all types of technical engineers, technical cooperation. Development has essentially become a real political type of undertaking. And this was also clearly explained in the last high-level Busan conference. Interdependence, coherence of all public policies, not just development policies, is essential. So we need to look at all the other policies that affect development beyond the traditional aid policies. You look, of course, at aid policies as well, but you also look at trade, you look at agricultural policies, you look at security policies, migration policies, and you see to what extent these are coherent in promoting development in developing countries. So that is the focus that ECDPM takes, and that many of the other players in the development debate take. Now, let's look at the comparisons. Plays in the global landscape. We are not talking yet development, we are not talking yet aid. I would say we have two economic powerhouses, Japan and the European Union. The European Union is sometimes compared to a trade giant, but a political dwarf. And in spite of the Lisbon Treaty, the EU is still perceived to be a payer and not necessarily a player in the international relations. And the same goes a bit with Japan, because of historic reasons. Japan is, of course, an economic powerhouse, but it does not have the real political power worldwide. And we see that both players, both allies, because I call Japan and the European Union clearly allies, as has been also stressed by the two previous speakers, both of us are losing influence to new competitors. I think that is a reality that we should recognize. Japan is not the only player anymore in Asia. Europe is not the only player anymore in Africa. So we need to take account of that new reality. Let us look at development. Japan, always the biggest donor up to 2000 in terms of volumes. Now it's about number 5. The European Union is described in the DAC, the Development Assistance Committee of the OECD, as a formidable player. 60% of all aid in the world, EU and member states, largest humanitarian donor. But what do we see since 2010? That the budgets are declining. There are, for the first time since 2010, declining aid budgets in the European Union. Both players have a major presence in the whole world. 136 delegations of the European Union worldwide. 140 countries where JICA, where Japan is playing a role, where it has projects. So major representation. And I would say that a difference that I could distinguish between the two is that Japan is not necessarily considered to be a strong intellectual player or leader in the policy debates, but it is considered to be a good doer. It's a doer, it's an implementer, it's hands-on. while the European Union, to some extent, is a bit the opposite. The European Union has great policies, has fantastic strategies, has one of the best developed types of instruments in all respects with all regions in the world, strategies. We've mentioned the Agenda for Change, EU Consensus on Development, whatever, Joint Africa-Europe Strategy, but the EU is perceived to be a weak implementer. Why? Because we don't speak with one voice, there's complex decision-making, all types of reasons. I'm coming back to that. But that could be already maybe a kind of distinction, but also a kind of complementarity between both players. Policy orientations. Japan traditionally always was focusing very much economic transformation, self-help, own development experience, which is very important, economic growth, infrastructure, but gradually issues, political issues such as fragile states, human security have been added, governance issues have been added to the role of Japan. The European Union mostly has been what I would call concerned with the software of development, less with the hardware. Poverty reduction, a very strong value-driven agenda, good governance, human rights, rule of law, inclusive growth, of course, has been added with the Agenda for Change. And then, of course, the own role model of the European Union, support to regional integration. What I see there is, again, some type of complementarity. Japan is moving more into the political arena, is moving more into also issues related to inclusive growth and social and other development, while the European Union is focusing more and more in recent times into economic transformation and economic governance issues, which have been stressed a lot in recent policy documents. Maybe in terms of approach, Japan always has been abstaining, I would say, from intervention and putting forward all types of conditionalities, where the European Union sometimes is perceived to be having a normative development approach with an application that is not always coherent, with double standards. We seem to have even more difficulties now with the creation of the European External Action Service to reconcile our values and our interests, which is one of the biggest challenges for the European Union in the years to come. Geographic focus, Japan very much on Asia, but in recent years also doubling of aid to Africa. And this is continuing, while Europe has always had a very strong focus and will continue to have a strong focus on Africa, and particularly the least developed countries, because that is maybe also a difference between both players. Japan had a strong focus on middle-income countries in the past, while the European Union always, particularly now with the differentiation policy, is focusing very much the least developed countries. As has been said by Mr. Simonnet, we will have also, with the differentiation policy, a number of middle-income countries, upper middle-income countries that will be excluded from European aid in the future. So there is also there a kind of a difference, but again, also some type of complementarity. Volumes and modalities, European Union is definitely contributing in terms of percentages and also in volumes more than Japan, but it's of course also a much larger grouping of countries and union. But we are now at something like 0.44%, Japan at 0.18% of gross national income. I would say that Japan, according to the DAC peer reviews, is having quite a strong emphasis on projects rather than programs, loans, technical cooperation, still some tight aid, correct me if I'm wrong. Strong preference also for bilateral aid and earmarked aid, while the European Union loves to go regional programs with different regional economic communities worldwide. So what could be improved there is that Japan could possibly put more focus on more programmatic approaches and also on the core and institutional funding types of institutions, the real capacity development, while the European Union definitely also can do more in terms of capacity development in the longer term. There's a lot to be said about the way the current policies of putting up everything for tenders and competition is definitely not necessarily going to lead to long-term institutional development here in the Union, in the European Union, but also not in the partner countries. Organization and management. Japan may be perceived to be more centralized, hierarchical. The European Union very complex, not always clear role divisions, various financial instruments. Japan has done a big move since 2008 with the new JICA, which has more responsibility for implementation and definitely for the coordination of Japanese aid. Europe has been doing quite some efforts in terms of devolution of authority and staff to the field. This is definitely one of the achievements also of the post-Lisbon era, a strengthened role for the European Union delegations, and the echoes that we get are quite positive. There's a new role of the delegation that is perceived to be very, very useful. At the level of the Japanese cooperation, there might be possibly more need to further delegate authority to the field. Issues related also to scrutiny in the European Union. This is a very, very important issue, and there's many, many instances that deal with the scrutiny of international and European aid. In Japan, this is also done, obviously, but there is maybe also there a tendency to have more separate and additional reporting for Japanese earmarked funds, which might have also transaction costs, which are sometimes higher than in other countries that can comply with a standardized reporting system that is general for all donors, particularly when it concerns multilateral organizations. Coordination and harmonization. I see again there that I've been a bit too radical when I say that Japan has been resisting harmonizations or resistance to harmonization. That's absolutely not the case, I would say. But there is a kind of a tendency to maybe flag planting, if I may say this. At the European Union level, there's a lot of talk about coordination, complementarity since the Treaty of Maastricht, 1992. That's more than 20 years ago. But we see that progress is extremely slow. We have been trying a lot. We try and try again, division of labor between member states and the Union. But it's difficult. It's very difficult. And particularly in times of crisis, we see that there are reverse trends in the European Union in the complementarity and coordination debates. Policy coherence for development, because if we said that aid is not necessarily going to save the world and is going to bring wealth in all developing countries, but that it is more important to have policy coherence between different policy areas, there I would say that the European Union is a forerunner in terms of policies. It has very solid strategic frameworks. It has very appropriate institutional mechanisms. There's a lot of independent analysis by think tanks, NGOs, civil society organizations to look at the cost of incoherence, to track progress. But in the practice, there's so little things that are moving. Even in those countries that are having very strong policies, strong interinstitutional mechanisms, a lot of practical knowledge analysis and so on, we see that progress is very marginal. In Japan, they have another solution to that. There is not really an explicit policy statement. There are some institutional mechanisms, but not that much, and there is also not that much reporting on it. So at the end of the day, you could say that in spite of big policies, there is also not that much progress in these areas. But this is an issue, of course, for debate also in the DAC. Partners and public support, I'm coming to the end. Japan has a very strong tradition, I would say, to work with national governments, less involvement of civil society organizations, NGOs. I read that only about 3% of the budget is going to these players, while the European Union for quite some time has quite a strong tradition to involve the CSOs, the civil society organizations. There's quite some structured dialogue that is being promoted also through the programming exercises in the different partner countries. And if you look at public opinion, I would say that the European Union has probably a stronger public opinion in favor of development than it is the case in Japan, where the pro-development lobby is not as strong as it is in the European Union. Where can we join forces? I think maybe the linking geographic area where we can definitely work much more together is Africa, because Africa becomes increasingly important for both partners, definitely also for for Japan, and the TICAD conference. In Europe, we will have next year in April the EU-Africa Summit. This is the joint Africa-Europe strategy. As has been stressed by the previous speakers, we have similar concerns, we have similar priorities, we have similar interests, and these could be different from some of the emerging development players. We have, obviously, as Mr. Simonnet said, an interest to bring these emerging development players on board and to share as much as possible with them. But for the time being, I think that Japan and the European Union have a different approach that is more targeting issues relating to values and politics, whether we apply them in concrete terms in practice, that remains to be seen, but definitely on paper there is much more concern with this human phase of development. It's not all about infrastructure, it's not all about big economic transformation issues. And so the challenge could be to complement the traditional MDG development focus more and more, the more soft approach, the software of development, with the post-2015 development vision, which is much more a vision that tries to address the problems, the global problems that we have worldwide, climate change and others, but also to work towards transformation of the economies in developing countries so as that they are able themselves to take responsibility in the medium term for their own development through domestic resource mobilization, taxation systems, better governance in a number of domains, and there we can definitely join forces, both Japan and the European Union. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, if you liked the video, make sure you subscribe so you never miss out on a video again. It's right here.